You're tapped in to the Questions Hip Hop Podcast. My name is Sean Kantrowitz. Each week on the show, we take the plunge into deep conversations, debates, thought experiments, and exercises dedicated to the subject of hip hop music. And I do it with some of the culture's greatest contributors and participants. This week, we're doing just that with a classic Can't Knock the Shuffle episode. For those who don't know, Can't Knock the Shuffle is a format where I take an artist's entire catalog, I put it into a playlist, and then I ask an algorithm to randomly select songs from the discography that the artist and I then talk about. And this can often result in discussions and conversations about songs that have never really been talked about by the artist before. This episode of Can't Knock the Shuffle was originally published on November 11th, 2020, and it features the queen herself, Bahamadia. Let me tell you about Bahamadia. She's been captivating listeners with her style and her lyrical skills since the 90s when she released her major label debut album, Kollage. The queen of Philadelphia hip-hop has definitely kept busy since those days. She's released projects through other indie labels. She's collaborated with some of hip-hop's absolute legends, hosted her own radio show, toured the world, and formed her own record label, B-Girl Records LLC. Bahamadia was also a guest on the Questions' original IG Live, the OG format, also back in 2020. And I'm proud to mention that because, for those who don't know, Bahamadia doesn't really do many interviews. And this was the second time that I got to build with her, and so it was just amazing to do so. And you know, both of those recordings happened in 2020, which was a time when so much was uncertain about the future. And both of these recordings were, of course, done remotely, so I had never been in the same room as Bahamadia at that point. And as the world opened up and things went back to more of a relative normal, I had the good fortune of meeting in person a lot of the people who had been guests on the Questions, who I hadn't met in the past. You know, some of the people that had been on the show I had connected with on the, quote unquote outside, as it were. But a lot of them, we had never seen each other until we hopped on a Zoom or went on IG Live together. And so, some of these people, like I said, I got to connect with for the first time. And some of them, I'd been going to hip hop shows and events for many decades now. And I had never crossed paths with, let alone seen Bahamadia in all that time. She's in Philly, I'm in LA. And, there might have been a small part of my brain that would have thought, yeah, I don't know if I'm ever going to actually meet Bahamadia. So why am I telling you all this? Because the story continues. Cut to July 4th, 2023. I'm not a big holiday person, as you might know if you've been listening to the show or if you know me, and I'm certainly not a big 4th of July guy either. But on this day in 2023, I didn't have any plans. I was, just basically set to keep to myself, stay inside, when I saw online that there was a free event happening in downtown LA, a 4th of July block party curated by the incredible Maya Jupiter, who I would end up meeting in person about a year later. She's a super dope Australian rapper and singer and radio personality and just a really amazing human being. And this lineup, honestly, was something that I had to check twice to make sure that I wasn't misunderstanding it or something, because I'm talking about it was a free concert in a public park on the 4th of July. So, all of that is to say, this is designed to draw an audience that is, we'll say, considerably broader than what usually aligns with my specific musical tastes. And headlining this event was Bahamadia, Cut Chemist, and Charlie Tuna. So I have nothing to do now at this point, except I absolutely have to go to this event on the 4th of July. And so I get downtown and, parking is a thing and there's a good deal of navigating through the streets and finding my way through the masses of crowds to this gigantic stage. And as I'm arriving, Bahamadia herself is on stage rocking her set with DJ Eclipse. And I watched the whole set, and Bahamadia is so incredibly dope, and she's commanding the crowd, a crowd which, again, in all likelihood, many of them probably had never heard of Bahamadia in their life. But she is an MC, she is moving the crowd, she has them under her command, and it's a great set. And then I'm standing in this park, and things, disperse crowd-wise after her set. And I'm standing there, and about 50 yards from where I am, I can see the barricades. And there's this little walkway. It's like a little sidewalk that the artists take once they step off of the stage to get to the trailers. And and where they're basically the backstage area. And so I see Bahamadia standing there. She's in this little sliver of where between the stage and the back area is. She's, behind these barricades, and she's talking to someone. Maybe she was signing an autograph, and she stops. And again, I'm like really far, like far enough that if I had shouted, she would not have heard me. And so for whatever reason, I see her and I see her looking in my direction. I just wave at her. Again, this is really far, and I'm benefiting from the fact that I just saw her on stage. I know that it's Bahamadia. I don't expect her to even be able to see me. And to my surprise, she waves back and she starts making like an excited motion for me to come towards her. And so I make my way all the way to the barricades, and I was stunned that she not only could see me, but she remembered me from doing these 2 interviews with her 3 years prior. We had only ever connected through a screen, but she saw me and she brings me backstage, and I get to spend a good 30 minutes chopping it up with her and DJ Eclipse. And it was an absolute pleasure to meet someone whose work I respect so much and who had already been so kind and gracious with me in giving, her time and her attention and her focus. It was just such an amazing experience, and I was so happy to get to meet the legend Bahamadia in person, and I'm happy to share this story with you, and I'm happy to share this episode with you, whether it's your first time hearing it or if it's a return to a classic that you may not have heard in a minute. Before we do that, I have to, as always, give a big shout out to the Questions Patreon. Thank you for your support. If you like the show and you want to support, hit patreon.com/thequestionshiphop or go to this episode's show notes. Patreon members get bonus episodes, exclusive content from episodes, early access to episodes, photos, videos, articles, essays, everything. It's all written by, and provided by me. If I had taken a picture of this Bahamadia story that I just told you about, I would have shared it on the Patreon. And next time that I connect with Bahamadia, because now I feel it's so much more likely to happen. It happened once, it could happen again. I will take photos and post them on the Patreon, and maybe more. Maybe we'll do a whole Patreon bonus episode, me and Bahamadia. We'll see. I can't call it. So let's begin. This is a Can't Knock the Shuffle classic episode of The Questions Hip Hop with Bahamadia.
Who did it first? Who did it best? Who did it worst? That's the question. Who rapping there? That remix, and what happened when? That's the question.
And let me ask you a question.
And if you ain't know what needs, then my guys knowing what you need. Some answers to the questions.
Bahamadia, how are you?
What's going on? So I'm cool.
We were speaking before. There's a lot of people who want to know more about the stories behind people's music and your music in particular. You have a storied career, but you aren't necessarily the most vocal person, I guess, when it comes to your own career.
Right. I just like to be under the radar and just focus on the art. I feel like I'm transparent enough in my work where people can kind of like connect the dots, but it seems people need more, so I'm here for it.
Song 1.
So we've got your whole catalog here. We've lined it up and it's been randomly selected. So we're going to get started with the first one. And I love when this happens because we hop around on the timeline here. But the first one does happen to be somewhat early in your career. And the first song is from 1996 from your Kollage album. And the song is called Innovation. This is an album that is going to be celebrating its 25th anniversary in 2021. How does that feel?
Yeah, I don't know, because I'm like, it still feels like yesterday to me, because I'm still in a dream state from me deciding to become a professional artist, like from that becoming to pass and all the things that I've experienced up until this point. I just feel like I'm just floating through it, not even in time. So it feels like a dream state, surreal.
I mean, looking at the track listing and the credits on that album, Kollage, it is a dream state. If you look at those names that are attached to it, it's one thing for a new or relatively new artist to come in and provide a new voice and a new perspective. But you weren't just doing it alone. This is an album that has, the Beat Miners and DJ Premier and Guru and The Roots and so many other people involved. I spoke with Jay Live early on for the show as well, and he sort of had a similar situation, that his first album was like the anointed. Like if you were going to be able to kick off, a career with your first album, this is the team you would pick. So when you think back, how was that experience of sort of assembling the Avengers, as it were? How did that come to pass?
Well, actually, Kollage, the production team was mirroring Nas's Illmatic, but Q-Tip and Pete Rock weren't available at the time. At first, Q-Tip was, but then for some odd reason, he pulled out last minute. So that's how the Roots got involved. Because, we're Philadelphia. So I said, well, we might as well deal with the home team, players. So that's how that happened. Because I was such a supporter of Nas's work early on, in terms of like the dream team of people that I felt like sonically provide a sound for my style at that time was the same people that he had producing for him. So I was like, I might as well just go ahead and get those same people,
Right. Follow that Illmatic blueprint, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. So I was following that.
Do you have any memories or specific thoughts behind the creation of Innovation?
I think that was one of the last songs. I think that was the last song that we recorded for Kollage at D&D Studio. To me, I felt like that was technically and stylistically, that was like the best representation of my style and who I saw myself as being in terms of an MC and writer and stuff. You know what I mean? It mixed in with a little improv. But some of it was written, some of it was improv. I remember going in the studio, beat was up, and I went in and just started rocking. Evil D came in. He was like, what's the name of the song? And I was like, Innovation. He goes, you with these one-word songs. Because Spontaneity, they produced that too. And that had, that was also just one word. I'm not into like a lot of bells and whistles. Just get straight to the point, really harsh,
You do have such a distinct style. What I'm curious to know was, by the time you got to Kollage, had your style evolved a lot from when you started? Like, are there old Bahamadia tapes where you sound unrecognizable, demo tapes, or sort of the beginning stages of your evolution?
Honing my skills, like I used to work at a studio in Southwest Philly called Birdnest Production. And a lot of different, like Steady B, KRS, a lot of different people used to come through there. And my style was always like progressive though, because I think that was my music. That's what I was exposed to coming up. And my household was diverse. We had exposed to diverse styles of music. Anywhere from like Earth, Wind and Fire to Weather Report, all in between, Manhattan Transfer, like all different Barbra Streisand, like all different styles of music that we listened to, my sister and I. I think that kind of like spills over into the tapestry of what I do, you know what I mean, or how my ear was shaped. I always had took a conversational approach to writing the music or performing the music, but being extra aggressive and overtly like one way on the style and something, no, I wasn't never like that. I don't know. I sound pretty much the same, I think. It depends on the tempo of the music, though, too. I'm aware of the timbre of my voice as well. I know that it can be soothing. I know that it can be tight. I know that it can be loose and floaty. I'm aware of that. So, like I said, depending on what the production is going to determine how I approach, delivery of it.
Totally. Now, and I noticed in the first verse of this song, you also give a shout out to Freestyle Fellowship and AC Alone. On the West Coast, I'm a transplant to the West Coast, so I meet a lot of people out here who revere everything that they've done. I grew up on the East Coast. Freestyle Fellowship was not necessarily as renowned out there in the circles that I was in at that time. So that kind of struck me that they were on your radar in that moment. Were you really up on what was going on the West Coast at that time?
Well, I'm an authentic hip hopper, so I am hip hop. So naturally, I would gravitate towards things that I feel is an extension of myself. You know what I mean? In terms of how I see myself in the placement of an MC and the movement of what we do, just being a style master or flow master too. Freestyle Fellowship, I felt like they were just pushing the envelope forward. They still are. Their first album that they had out, it was just different. You know what I mean? And I hadn't heard anybody approaching like cadences and writing and stuff like that, breathing techniques, any of that. I hadn't seen it aside from what I was exposed to on the East Coast, for East Coast hip hop. So when I saw that West Coasters were just as advanced in that way, stylistically, and I was excited because I felt like that vibration had resonated globally. You know what I mean? Because then as I started to travel, I started to see even more people, more artists that were progressive thinkers.
All these years later, what is your relationship with Kollage as an artist? Because, there's a lot of artists who they have warm feelings about such a great piece of work that happened earlier in their career. And some artists, like when you talk about like a Nas with an Illmatic, I think Nas has expressed that like he likes Illmatic, but he's kind of sick of people always asking him to make another Illmatic. So how do you feel about Kollage?
No, I mean, all my work is what it is. I feel like all my work is my best work because it's an expression of where I am at the time, in its transparency, in its subject matter, everything. So once I create a project, a song, or anything, or guest appearance, anything, I'm like kind of done with it. You know what I mean? I go back to it because people want to hear it. It still resonates with people when you're touring and all that kind of stuff. So that's my connection to it. But it becomes just the work at that point, the art in my heart and the work in real time.
Song 2.
This is from the early 2000s. I think it was 2002. And the song is called Transcend, and it is on King Britt's album, Adventures in Lo-Fi. I mean, King Britt is another, Philly representative and just, such a great ambassador of music from that city. What do you recall about the collaboration that happened on that album?
He's very impactful in the world music scene, too, especially for DJ culture and progressive electronic music. I knew King for years. Like I knew him from the club scene in Philadelphia, clubs like the Black Banana and Limelight, stuff like that, Zanzibar. And pre that, just seeing him around the art scene, in our formative years, high school and stuff like that. When he contacted me about the song, and he told me about the project and everything. The song was actually supposed to be based on this sci-fi movie. I think it was called Brother from Another Planet. And so I was the second person that the alien, the brother from another planet, was to meet. And that was my encounter. I just chose to do a story version of my encounter. So that's what that was. And it was dope. I mean, the song, the sounds that he chose for the song. I wrote that song in like about 20 minutes. That's how quickly it happened. Like they say sometimes like work happens like that when it's just meant to be, like it connects and you just kind of like spill it out. You know what I mean? Sometimes it takes me a little longer to craft my lyrics, but that one took me about 15, 20 minutes to write.
When it comes to doing collaborations, what sort of makes you decide whether or not you want to do it? Is there a world in which King Britt would have brought you something, and if you weren't really feeling the track, like would you sort of force yourself to see if you can feel it, or if it doesn't really speak to you, are you comfortable just saying like, this doesn't really work for me?
The latter. If it does, I'll never force it. If it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. You know what I mean? And I hear a piece of music, because the lyrics are already there. The music is there. It just has to bring it out, pull it out of you. That's my approach to it. When I hear the music, it just starts coming together, and either it comes together or it doesn't. Like, how people say they have writer's blocks? Like, I don't get writer's blocks. I just rest. I think I might have said that to you before. Like, I rest. Like, I don't force it. I don't feel like it should be forced. That's the one thing, anything we shouldn't do that, like love, just friendship, or just, communicating, whatever. It's just we all should know that we have a space to be ourselves at all times. You know what I mean? And I that translates over into my art. Every time I connect with Kingdom, I'm always challenged to take a different approach and perspective in the writing and conceptually, because you never know what you're going to get from him.
Did he present to you the concept sort of the sci-fi element when you guys got together, or was that just an idea that you had to do when you heard the track?
Well, I've just always been into sci-fi stuff, you know what I mean? And we share that interest. And I think he just knew that song was going to be, that I would know what to do with that. He didn't even give me a concept in there. He just told me what the concept of his project was. I'm like, okay, I'm going to finish it. If it's an alien, then if I'm the first person that the alien's going to meet, that would be cool to take an approach like that and tell a story of my encounter. And that's how it unfolded.
I mean, if we're going to be talking sci-fi, then I think we got to ask, what are your top 3 sci-fi flicks?
It depends on where I'm at. You know what I mean?
But I'm going to say I'm a Trekkie. So anything from in there, and then Barbarella, and what would be my other one? I don't have a third one.
That's fair. There's enough Star Trek films to fill.
Exactly.
One other question I wanted to ask while we're on this topic. We might have talked about this when you were on the questions earlier this year. What is it about Philadelphia that produces so many dope artists and musicians, do you think?
I think it's just the blue collar approach to everything with a serious tone of having like a high regard for the arts, a high regard for representing the most honest perspective that you can. You know what I mean? Because that's day to day too. You know what I mean? It's not just over in the arts world, it's just as Philadelphians, authentic Philadelphians. There's so many talented people here too. It's really a good ground for like training ground, if you will, to hone your skill so that when you leave and go somewhere else, you're going to be that much more impactful because of the people that you're rubbing elbows against, or the people that you're, I don't want to say in competition, but the people that are inspiring you to be your best version of yourself artistically.
It sort of seems like it's that steel sharpens steel concept.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Every time I meet a musician or an instrumentalist or a vocalist from Philly, they always are just impeccable. Like they're really skilled at what they do. It's not just that they are technically good. They also often have like that vision and the creative aesthetic as well to match with that. So it's not just like session guys, you know, although they're great enough to be session guys, but they kind of bring another component, you know, to the table.
Always. I think it's a spiritual element too that's just innate here too with that standard.
Song 3.
This is the last of the collabs that we have in here. I said there were a couple of collabs, but befitting that we were talking about Philly because this is from 1994 and the song is called Proceed 3 with The Roots.
I think that was the first session where remember, I told you I met Black Thought at Armand Records, and he wanted me to come in and do some music with them. I think that was the actual song that we came in. That was the first song we created together. Well, I appeared on with them. They had already had the song. It was dope. You know what I mean? I was happy. I was excited to work with some hometown artists because I always was going back and forth to New York a lot. You know, outside of me honing my first phase of recording skills at the production company I was at the time, I didn't really interact with a lot of artists, regional artists, except for the people that were in my immediate circle. You know what I mean? I didn't deal with a lot of artists, so it was cool to be creating with somebody at home. I came in, Malik B was there, everybody was there. I just came in and just did my parts. Because I think they may have sent me the music first and I wrote my part and then I came in and laid it. And I got a chance to vibe with them and everything, which was really cool. Because I was really shy back then. So I didn't do too much talking. I observed more in it. But I felt comfortable there, you know. Me and Malik B had built a bond immediately. R.I.P. to him. He was just a really caring, sensitive soul. Very genuine. High regard for female practitioners in hip hop. You know what I mean? He held a high esteem for females that rhyme. And just all around fun. He was like zany too, like real funny, like a comedian almost, like when you caught him relaxed. He was also a tortured soul too. But fortunately, he had the art, you know what I mean? He was able to filter through. But I rarely saw him write though. He was always one of those types that went in and actually improv. I actually saw him go in, lay a vocal. It was dope, but it was one mistake. And he scrapped the whole verse because he couldn't remember what he said and went back in and did a whole nother, even doper verse. And it would just get doper and doper each time. You know what I mean? To the point, and just rhyming to the point where you had to edit out, you know, just let him rhyme. And then just edit it down to fit a 16, frame. Yeah, that's the type of brilliance he had, the gift he had, you know. It was just awesome to see. And it was always an honor, even before. Because you know how it's like some people, they form him to be a classic or to be these legends and stuff in our culture and hip hop and all, right? When it's unfolding, you don't see yourself, or you don't see the people as being there. You know what I mean? It just happens over time that you realize, yo, I was witnessing something that was not normal at this time. You know what I mean? Or these are people I'm rubbing elbows with, and we're all considered to be this at this time. You know, you don't think of it like that. You're just giving your best self to your music and everything, you know, at the time of your craft. You know, you just present your best side of yourself. And it's just dope to be aligned, like you said, the iron sharpens iron, to be aligned with stellar artists like that, because it makes you always bring your A game, you know? Yeah. And then actually, and I was actually more unpopular than them at the time. When we did the Proceed remix, I think that was the first time that they had ever gotten commercial radio play. Like, I think they were more popular over abroad because they had already been traveling and stuff like that, going on tours overseas for a long time before they broke stateside.
Right. A great moment as well for a time where like remixes actually were completely different songs. So this is like sort of a remix to Proceed from their Do You Want More album, but it's a completely different beat, different verses. Feels like such a dope relic of a time, whereas now a lot of remixes are often not.
Oh my God, those are the days of old, right?
Yeah.
It's just something different now. Music is just approached, taken differently now, though. Disposable now. So
right. Do you think that there's something that we as listeners and practitioners and participants can do to sort of, I don't want to say like revert back to how it was, because that never seems progressive, but like sort of like alter, the course of the disposability, because that sucks. Like music shouldn't be disposable.
I think that if you're a lifestyle person, it'll always be art first. I think if you're an innate creative and this is like assigned to you divinely, like some people, we can discipline ourselves to be anything. You know, you can take courses to learn how to utilize your voice. You can learn how to play instruments. But when you're designed and built to do this, it's much different spiritually. You know what I mean? And so I think that for people like us, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be the art first because it's an expression of life for us. For some people, it's just an ends to a mean, or it's just a popular thing to do. You know, some people it's the cop out. Some people it's just about the business of it. You know what I mean? And it had to evolve like hip hop. Like it had to evolve into what it's become in order for it to be valuable or value to be placed on it as a product. But it's eating itself in the same aspect.
Right.
You know? It depends on if you're dealing with it from the mainstream standpoint, though, because everything that's pop goes that way. The commercialization of anything becomes that. But there's still lanes and still avenues where you can just celebrate being a creative and the balance of that in a business person without compromising your integrity. It's just far in between now. The opportunities are becoming more and more, it's coming slimmer now because of technology.
Well, that is a great transition in a way to the next song that I have here.
Song 4.
And the song is from 2017. You released it yourself, and it is called Dialed Up 2. It's the song/album Dialed Up 2. So this is an album that you produced entirely on your phone, and you pooled together several different male artists to appear on this, from, Kev Brown, Prozac Turner, or Geechee Suede from Camp Low, Zion Eyes.
Zion Eyes.
Yeah. And this was a sequel because you had done a prior one, just the first Dialed Up. Would you consider this like a song, or is it sort of a mix? Because this is basically a very sprawling, like 12, 13-minute song with a lot of different movements. So how do you sort of classify the Dialed Up project?
It's an album, like it's a vignette, like it's an album. I feel like we can call, if you complete a thought sonically, you set lyrics to music, you complete that thought and emotion. If you articulated that, then it's done. It's complete. So I don't believe in like the time signatures. I mean, there's standard ones, quote unquote, like standard ones, 16/8, 16/8. But you can do a lot of things within 2.5 minutes, minute and a half. You know what I mean? So that's the goal. The goal is always, for me, is always pushing forward and challenging and disrupting what's supposed to be the so-called standards, you know what I mean? And bringing something new to add to a conversation that's continual, or it should be. So that's what that is. And I also found it interesting because it was all like male vocalist on the project. And I deliberately wanted to do that because I wanted to see how, first of all, I hadn't seen it really done too much. I think Georgia Ann Muldrow produced a lot of male artists, you know what I mean, singers and MCs, in terms of like doing something, integrating like new technology approaches for music production. I hadn't really seen that done. And so that was the challenge too, to be a first, you know what I mean?
What sort of led you to begin producing on a phone?
It was just easier. It made my workflow easier. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, why not? You know, first it started out with just sketching stuff like the beats. They became a stockpile of stuff I just had. And I was like, let me just lay some verses to it. And I laid them together. I was like, I might as well put these pieces together and just put it out there. You know what I mean? In the studio I was working at the time, I let the engineer hear, and he was like, yo, this is dope. You should, you know, you definitely should put this out. I was like, yeah, I'm going to, you know, go ahead on and put it out there. And I just put it up, had the Bandcamp, put it up there, and it was well received. And then for the second one, I wanted to do something different. But I actually have like several volumes of them, like at least 2 more that I want to do. Just exploring different sides of production and styles and sounds.
Right. Beyond the ease of which you can do it, do you find that the tool that you use in the construction of the music affects the actual output? Like, in what ways does making music on a phone affect the actual like timbre or aesthetic of the music that you're making?
It's almost like being a bedroom producer, and you know, you don't have a mastering suite. You don't have a money budget for somebody to come in and master your project. So you just work with what you have, and that kind of creates the sound in your edge. It's like that. Like some of the levels are off, some of the stuff is imbalanced. That's on purpose because I feel like that's all color, that all made it all like a montage of one thing that's different and moves and does different things, but it's still cohesive, you know? And that's what I'm into. I'm into, as long as, like I said, I get the sound out and I articulate what the purpose of that emotion I was trying to tap into, then that's what I'm good with. You know, there have been sometimes, like even on my next project, I got like actual vocals that I cut in my phone, and we're going to use those because the moment and the emotion that I had, I can't replicate it. So I need to use that. You know what I mean?
Right. You know, releasing things independently, this is a stage at which you're putting music out through your own label. What has that experience been like? Obviously, starting in the 90s and having your first album be on a label, and then you've been on independent labels since then. Are there things that you prefer or things that aren't as good about doing it, you know, via, as you said, your Bandcamp?
The interesting part for me and the most challenging part was transitioning from the corporate cog to a true DIY artist. But in between that, stopping through dealing with like a indie label. Because I was signed for a minute to Good Vibe Records in LA after I did the EMI and Chrysalis thing. Those was the final pieces where I learned the actual business of the music, what the components were to make to run an actual label through both of those experiences. So I was like, well, the next logical step for me is to just start my own stuff. So I started B Girl Records LLC at the end of my deal with Good Vibe. We're doing it, dude. It was an imprint at first because I wanted to do an actual label with them, you know, and basically they wanted me to be like a talent scout for them, like where I would put the artist out on the imprint, but I wouldn't own the masters, and it was all about ownership to me. So I'm like, if that's going to be the case, then you either need to, you know, hire me as an independent contractor, but I definitely should have a vested interest in something because you're using my insight ear and my talent of getting these people, these artists to come over to your label. That was one of the challenges too, being respected for my business acumen in that. And I don't know if it was me being a woman, having these conversations with other entrepreneurs in that space, or whether it was just an artist that was just too insightful about what their position entails, aside from just doing the creative thing, you know, the creative tasks, going in the studio, because I've always had a hand in my imaging and writing my own treatments, producing every single project that I've ever done, but I wasn't given credit because I didn't understand that those were extra roles. I thought that every artist's voice was, you know, active in there because it was my vision, and I was able to I'm always able to articulate what I want, what statement I want to make with my music and my art all the time. You know, when I get the songs, like I was telling you, when the music strikes me to write, I actually get the visual to it too. You know, I actually sometimes the album title comes, you know what I mean? And then I work backwards. So it really, in reverse, it's really crazy how it happens. I can't dictate when when the order of those process happens, but it's interchangeable, but it always is the same. And I feel like, I should be compensated for the other skill sets that I had because these people are benefiting from it. Like if I'm bringing over my resources, these are my art people. Mystic I broke her records on my radio show, my commercial radio show. So why are you signing her without me having the knowledge of it when I made you aware of her? I should get a finder's fee for that. And I shouldn't be scrutinized for knowing that I have a right to receive that from you guys.
Right.
So that's where the challenge always happened at, and I always, from that point, that's when I said, no, I'm going to go total DIY now because some of these labels are structured to be artist friendly, or they take an artist friendly approach and say that they're indie labels. In actuality, they have the same functionalities as the major labels have had with the slave mentality thing for the artists, which is never fair. So ownership, it was always a thing. And then being an authentic hip hopper, it was always about ownership. It was always about charging for parties. It was always charging for performances. If you were a DJ, you always charged the fee. If you did the flyers, you always got paid to do the flyers, to do the shirts, to do the customized jackets, So that's the spirit of entrepreneurship that's always lacking in the conversation of the components that make up our culture. They always say the 4 elements when it's actually 5. They miss the entrepreneurial piece. That's where that all stemmed from. Just wanting to own something and be somebody, stake my claim, and be able to sustain myself through my work and efforts,
You mentioned earlier that you're not sure if the resistance that you would often find was because you were a woman navigating those spaces or if you were an artist navigating those spaces. And I would wager to say it was probably both. It's an industry that is historically not always particularly friendly to people from either category, let alone to be coming from like both of those, vantage points. That's why I think it obviously is so important that you've sort of staked out your own thing as an artist and as a woman.
And being courageous enough to be myself. Like I never had strategists come in and tell me this is how we want you to look. Or, I never used my feminine attributes to sell records. It was always about the talent. That's why I always downplayed my, physical attractiveness or like just the way I carried myself because I wanted people to respect me for me. You know what I mean? Just as a person, though. That's one of the hardest things. But again, I'm built to that task. So the people that are coming behind me now, I feel like that gate is open. Before then, it hadn't even been really, not hip hop, there hadn't really been any women that had been in that space. They all had like ghostwriters. They all had teams of people. I never had like adequate or proficient management. None of that. Like I was always self-managed. I had people in place, but they didn't understand how to position me as an artist. So I wound up negotiating my own situations from day one, which is a lot, you know?
Especially as an artist as well. Like, because it's not like you're just having to deal with that, but then you're also tasked with driving the creative that ultimately you take the creative out and the whole operation can't sustain itself.
Right. Unfortunately for me, I don't even know how I was like for my Good Rap Music project, for instance, like I don't even know how I had the wherewithal to even like do that whole record from the creative to all the administrative stuff by myself with my lawyer handling the contracts, but even hand delivering, like that's a lot to be doing by yourself pre-internet, pre-social media. The platforms were out, but people had mastered how to use them from a business standpoint for DIY artists the way they do now. Everybody's savvy with it now. A lot of people are, but not at that time.
Did you find, in that moment, I've always sort of thought about this, like you mentioned that the way that your image and the way that you were presented and what you chose to focus on was one thing. And then, artists who came before you and a lot of your contemporaries even who were women in hip hop, they often would utilize those things. And I wonder, from your personal perspective, we could split this up into two things. From your personal perspective at the time and your personal perspective now in hindsight, how did you feel about, like, let's just say, if we're talking about the mid-90s, like the Foxy Browns and the Lil' Kims, did you constantly feel that people were asking you to shit on them? What was your relationship with them? Because I know a lot of people, they sometimes, fans or outside people, will project their thoughts on, like, you must feel this about them. You know what I mean? Like, because you're different. And I wonder if that held to be true, that you're like, yeah, I'm not really messing with that music. Or was it like, I like that music, but that's not what I do, you know?
Well, always, for after I learned about the business of music and marketing and how, the radio and all that stuff, mainstream is basically about advertisement and product placement and all that. I just took it for what it was. I actually met Foxy Brown. She was really warm and sweet. You know what I mean? I met her on two different occasions. One time, I think at D&D Studio. And I think I met her on one time. We had a show in Busta Rhymes. And it was a bunch of us. And she was there. And she was really nice. And then I saw Kim in passing. I never had a chance to converse with Kim at all. But she's somebody that I actually would be interested in doing a talk with, like an IG Live or some type of one-on-one conversation with, just to get her perspective on the things that she experienced during that time period up until now. Because I'm sure we have similar experiences. It was just on two different dynamics, you know what I mean? But I just always saw it for being what it was. And like you said, it was, for me, yes, exactly what it was. That just wasn't my thing, but I was never anti that, you know what I mean? But I definitely knew that I was holding the flag for the B-girl aesthetic, holding it up high, but that's because that's who I am, you know what I mean, as a person. And that's outside of just me being a professional artist, you know what I mean? That's just who I am. I was always just a part of hip-hop. I am hip-hop. You know what I mean? So that's how I felt about that. But I noticed that in interviews, people back then, especially back then, people will always ask me about other women. But when I would read articles that were conducted on other female artists, particularly hip hop, they would never ask them about me. They would always ask me about them. I'm thinking now maybe it was because maybe they knew I was going to have a certain etiquette or something like that. I don't know. But I was like, especially people that I know that were heavily influenced by the work that I've been putting out. You should be asking them about me, not the other way around. Just to hold up the space of acknowledging that there are people that have been holding the baton and that have been doing the work. Because otherwise erasure is going to come into play, which, you know how that goes. They just move you out. You already was a standard or a node, and then they just extract from you and put somebody else in your place. Repackage it.
Right.
Song 5.
We're moving back to 2005. This is off a project that you just mentioned before, Good Rap Music. And the song is called Thank You. Where were you at? It sort of seems like you're addressing everybody who's played an important part. So it seems like it's a time of reflection.
Well, I'm a born-again Christian, so I had just gotten baptized. I was heavy into the church at that time, like going to church and just studying the Word of God and all that. It was just a time of reflection. It was. And it was a time, I just felt like I needed to show gratitude. And I was just grateful that I looked around, and a lot of people that I started out with wasn't working. They lost their zeal to do this music and be a part of the industry and all of that, the culture even. And my life, I'm still flourishing. I'm touring. It's like a decade or more after that. I'm still getting booked for festivals and tours and stuff like that. And everybody's not working. Even people that have sold way more records than I had. I feel like I needed to acknowledge that it's divine order that I'm doing what I'm doing this long. And it's not just me. There are people that are connected to me, even if inadvertently, that's helping hold this whole thing up and make it a reality each time. And I wanted to just acknowledge that, you know what I mean? You do come to a point where you have to realize that it's not always about you. People adore being appreciated. You know what I mean? It doesn't take much to say thank you to somebody that's paid forward into your life or that's holding you down. And it costs you nothing. Well, it costs us our time, but, the effort is well spent,
Song 6.
From your 2000 album, BB Queen, and the song is called 114. We talked about this a little bit when you were on the questions as well. This is totally, a beautiful marriage of the Slum Village aesthetic and the Bahamadia aesthetic. Mm-hmm. How did this song come to be?
I had known JD for years. Like I knew him first from the St. Andrews days, and when I was doing my collage run and stuff like that, I had met him, Dez, and Proof and everybody back in that time period. They, especially Proof and DJ Dez, they were like my hosts, if you will, in the market, taking me around, servicing me with the Maurice Malone gear and all that kind of stuff back in the day. And St. Andrews house shoes and everybody. Fast forward, we reconnected because I had a radio show on Bahamadia B-Sides on 103.9 at the time, Radio 1. And Tim Maynard, he was managing Slum Village, Dwelle at the time. I think he was doing some management duty tasks for Fat Cat too. He was servicing me records, Slum Village stuff, and I was playing it. Some kind of way we just started a conversation, Tim and I. And then that led to him wanting to handle some of my management stuff. Start working with him. And then that's the connection, how we all start working together. Just touring, just creating. And then when I was started with Good Vibe, once they found out that I was there, they asked me questions about it. So they followed my lead and came over. That's how Good Vibe wound up getting
fantastic.
Getting fantastic, yeah.
Volume 2. So you were there first, and then SV kind of followed.
Yeah, they followed my. That's what I was talking about with Good Vibe, because I'm like, well, I mean, these people, I'm an authority in this situation, so they're coming based on my judgment. This is like to the second or third artist that you've signed. You got to cut me a check for this. It's like, and you're dealing with my graphics guy. That happened, and then from there, we did one. That was one of the songs we did. Did 114. And then JD was on the remix, did a remix of it with him singing on the hook, because that track was actually going to be on my full length that JD was going to produce solely. He was going to do my whole album. Yeah, and then he passed away. So that's what happened with that. But just from connecting, Dwelle too. Dwelle was that's how he appeared on Philadelphia.
Yeah, this a song from the same project.
Yeah, we did that in the hotel, and Beautiful Things too.
I might be dense here, but what is the relevance of the 114?
114, that was the time that we had went in the studio.
Ah.
That was the time the session was nearly over. So that's why I named it that. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Didn't have a name for it, was dope. I was like, let's say 114. That's just what it was called. And I spelled it like that to add some pizzazz to it.
Oh yeah. It makes it even more intriguing. It's just like
And it felt like nighttime. When you listen to it, the bass subby is that whole vibe, it felt like a nighttime, early morning vibe.
I think that kind of applies to a lot of the aesthetic of your music in general, that it does have very nighttime vibes.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a night owl in general?
Yeah, up all night. I was up nearly 2 days since the other day.
Oh, wow.
Just creating and stuff. Like, I have to make myself go to sleep.
I can relate. I can definitely relate. That song, the version that's on the album, is not a JD production, though, right?
Yeah, the original 114. I was told that because T3, he does production, but he had been doing the production for a while. I knew this, and I wanted him to do a track on there, but he wasn't confident in doing it at the time. I don't know why, because he's always dope to me.
Well, maybe because he was in a group with JD. I mean, that would make me pretty.
Yeah, maybe he was like, yo, I can't even measure up to that,
right.
But yeah, I still thought he was dope. At least he's putting out music now, his beats now. I think Ron Maynard did that track. I mean, Ron Estelle, I'm sorry.
Song 7.
This is a song called Here, and this was also released independently more recently. This was like 2015. This is high octane. This is way more energetic than the songs that we've listened to thus far. Mm-hmm. And this was sort of the first thing that you had done in a while, if I'm not mistaken, at the time. The previous album was good rap music, and forgive me if I'm getting the timeline confused here at all. 2005 to 2015, that's a long time. So that's coming in swinging with Here.
Yeah, I'm out here living. I was out here living. But actually I had written, I wrote Here during the Good Vibe days, like, because I wrote it around by like 05 or something like that. And originally I wrote it to Psycho Les from the Beat Nuts, sent me a track. We were going to work on some music together and had a falling out over some crazy stuff that we long since patched up. That's my guy. Yeah, so I wrote it to that. I didn't even write to the track. And then one of my mentees who recently passed away, programmed the drums and everything, and we arranged it and stuff like that some years later. I did the video like last year or something like that, because I've been doing music the whole time. I've been active in my craft this whole time, and I haven't been visible. And, but I just been sitting on the music, because until I sorted out how, this virtual realm of where we are now with this whole language, virtual language stuff and social media and all this, I wasn't going to put out, because I invest too much time in my whole life into doing my craft. And I just didn't want to just put stuff out just for the sake of looking like I'm just trying to stay afloat. And knowing that I'm prolific and knowing that I'm a benchmark, like I'm not going to just put stuff out. I don't feel like I have to rush to do that. Especially knowing from a business standpoint that somebody that's already established, and I don't like to say legacy artist, because I feel like my talent supersedes that. But I know somebody that's an established brand, if you will. It's just about marketing and promoting, that's all. Getting with the right team and connecting those dots. So I know that about myself. So that's why I'm never in a rush. And that's why it seems like, the pause button was just released and I just float right back into the scene. You know what I mean? Because that's the approach and the mindset that I have.
Right. But it's not like you had not been active. That's why it's not.
Yeah, the whole time. And people are blown away. Like, I can't believe it. How were you expecting for me to sound? Some people, some artists, again, fit a time period. Then you have some people that their assignment spiritually is just to continue to press forward. They're just a vessel of truth and light, in that they're always afforded the liberty and the honor of being able to translate perspectives in different time. That resonates in time. You ain't even operating in time as far as I'm concerned. I feel like I'm operating in eternity, and time has to catch up to me. It has to be that, when people say, well, you're ahead of your time. Yeah, I'm ahead of time, period. If you're materializing things, I'm sure if you're an innate artistic, or creative, which I'm sure you are, because you resonate with me. So you have to be an extension of that. I'm sure there's some notes or some songs or some concepts or some approach that you have taken to creating your art, your music, and your art that just blows your own mind, but you're not even looking at it like that. You're just following that clock or that instruction that's already inside you, because the music is inside of us already. You know what I mean? Sometimes you got to live it to tap into how to filter those traumas, those experiences, the sadness, the happiness, all that, and make it what it needs to be, palatable for other people that are stuck, other people that aren't triumphant over the things that we've become triumphant over. So sorry for being long-winded, but I'm passionate.
Kidding me? I love this shit. Come on. I feel like fans would want to know, hearing that whole process that you explained, do you think that you feel closer now than before to putting out more music? Because, I was kind of unclear when I came across this song if there was going to be an album that it was from, or that if it was sort of like just a single, like kind of loosey that was thrown out there. But I know that you're sitting on music and that you have music, I'm sure. But where do you think you are in terms of eventually putting out a full-length project?
Well, just in months to come, because I like I said, I'm handling everything myself. So imagine coming from having teams of people helping you to you having to man everything. I don't complain about that, because it's a blessing. People say gift and a curse. So I'm gonna say pro and con. The con of it is having to man all of that by yourself. It's been hell, because in the process of that, one aspect of it is great, because people know who you are. People, where it's just awareness. Oh my God, I hear you. I found you. I hear that all the time. People, I found you. You're here. You're still doing your active. You're still doing music. Then the other side of that is the meet that demand, because for me, putting something out, it's going to open up a floodgate. It'll open that floodgate up. And how are you going to handle all of that? It's coming at you. You're going to have more of a demand to put more music out. You're going to become a machine now. But we're not machine. We're not robots. You know what I mean? And I feel like my value shouldn't, my productivity shouldn't, the volume of it shouldn't predict who I am as a person. And that's where I get, I just refuse to become a prisoner of this shit. And so that's the reason why.
You got to take your time with it, so you don't sort of thrust yourself into something that you don't want to participate in.
But here, that was connected to a project that I had been working on. My mom transitioned in 2012, so for a while I didn't want to do any more music. I was just experiencing a loss like that. I just didn't want to do anymore. But then that was the only coping mechanism that I really had to express myself. So I was right back there. I was so-called throwing the towel so many times, but yeah, I just keep getting drawn back in.
Right. What else am I going to use to dry off, all of these emotions and life experience? Like, I need this towel.
Right, exactly. That's where I am with that. But I did decide that I was going to not be, because it's just selfish at a point to just hoard stuff. Again, it's for the greater collective. It's not just about you. You are a vessel to do this. You are vessels. Especially if you had the kind of impact and influence that you have as a prolific artist, as a trailblazer. That's not just about you. You got to take yourself and sit your ego down and take yourself out that equation. So that's why I said, let me just start putting this stuff out.
Big thank you again to Bahamadia for being so kind and gracious with her time and revealing her process behind these songs and for gifting the world with her songs in the first place. Shout outs once again have to go out to the Questions Patreon. Shout out to Midas the Beast and Zarism for making the show's theme. Shout out to the Stony Island Audio Podcast Network, Talkhouse, and that's it, folks. If you weren't able to tell from the intro and outro on this, feeling a bit under the weather. 2025 keeps 2025ing, so I'm going to get some rest, and we'll be back next week with another episode of the Questions Hip Hop Podcast.
Stony Island Audio.